August 20th, 1619, marked the beginning of what the world has come to know as the transatlantic slave trade of Negroid people from off the western coast, or hook, of the African continent. Old, young, and even infant Negroid men and women were rounded up from what we know as the Slave Coast, Benin, Gambia, Nigeria, and other surrounding African countries in the region. This illegal capture of Negroid people would mark the beginning of what the Bible states as the Deuteronomy 28 curses, where the children of Israel, or in this case, the tribe of Judah, would be taken to a land their forefathers had not known, to serve the Grecian captors as slaves for a period of 400 years. Now we can note that there were other slave trades of Negroid people that had taken place before 1619, case in point, the Arab slave trade.
The Arab slave trade began when the Arabs first invaded North Africa in the 7th century. The Arabs' first entry point into North Africa was, of course, Egypt. The general Amir ibn al-As invaded Egypt in December 639 with a humble force of 4,000 men. According to the sources, these men belonged to the Arab tribe of Ak and partly to the tribe of Gafik. That Arab slavers used to take wheat, raisins, and figs to the western Sudan, spread them across the ground near suitable settlements, and then seized and enslaved unsuspecting Africans as they came looking to purchase or inquire. This method was rare, but it just goes to show the lengths that Arabs would go to profit from the booming slave trade in North Africa. Large numbers of Africans were sent north, generally to serve as domestic servants or slave concubines. It's been estimated that from the 10th to the 19th century, some 6,000 to 7,000 slaves were transported north each year. The journey across the desert was, of course, absolutely brutal, and many Africans perished along the way. According to Henry Hamilton Johnston, who was a British explorer, he claims in his book that many slaves would be able to just reach the drinking place and then would sink down and die before the water reached their lips. Another primary source of slaves for the Arab world was on the eastern coast of Africa. This is where enslaved Africans known as the Zanj were in high demand. In general, enslaved African people were used for agriculture, labor, household help, or to be concubines or soldiers. The expanse of the Arab slave trade was far-reaching. In fact, a 7th century Chinese text mentions ambassadors from Java presenting the Chinese emperor with 2 Sengqi, or Zanj slaves, as gifts in 614. And 8th and 9th century chronicles mention Sengqi enslaved Africans reaching China from the Hindu kingdom. These traders captured Bantu peoples largely from the interior of present-day Kenya, Mozambique, and Tanzania. Large slave markets developed in Zanzibar and Pemba, where at the height of the trade, as many as 15,000 to 20,000 slaves passed through annually. The slave trade became so significant that in 1840 the Sultan of Oman moved his seat of power to Zanzibar. In the East African interior, people such as the Mwezi, Ngoni, Yao, and Makua raided neighboring communities and sold their captives to Arab caravans, often in exchange for firearms. In addition to the many East African slaves sent to the distant shores of Arabia and the Persian Gulf, others remained as laborers on Arab plantations in East Africa, such as the Omani clove farms in Zanzibar. The Arab slave trade was absolutely devastating to African people. It was a trauma akin to the Atlantic slave trade. The Arab slave trade was at least 700 years before the Atlantic slave trade, was no less dehumanizing or horrific, and on top of that, it lasted much longer.
So we learned that the Arab slave trade was a horrific experience for Negroid people. But this was the first time the Negroid people had been taken completely away from lands their forefathers had known, and would suffer to a T every curse mentioned in Deuteronomy 28. The curses said that the true children of Israel would be put in chains, lose their heritage, would not be able to lend, but only borrow due to their economic circumstance. The scripture says that they would not enjoy their children because they would be taken away from them. It says that their little boys and girls would be sold as harlots and for rum. It says that this slave would be called bywords. And would have fear even when no one is seemingly after them. Deuteronomy 28 says that the young would rule over the old.
It's hard to imagine a set of legitimate circumstances that would justify a grown man towering over a 78-year-old woman on the number 2 train and kicking her repeatedly in the chest and face. You could also easily argue there is nothing that could justify the young men heard off camera, oohing and awing, as if they were spectators watching a sporting event, instead of doing something, even if it's just switching from their camera app to the phone app to call 911. In short, this was a brutal assault, nothing more, that took place on Sunday, March 10th, just after 3 o'clock in the morning.
And that regardless of how powerful their leaders would be, or what level of support they might have in their desires to free their Negroid brethren from bondage, that no man would be able to save them. So who are these people? And what does the Holy Scriptures say will occur to them after the 400 years of captivity in the lands they've been scattered to across the 4 corners of the earth? Stay tuned, because the preceding video on this channel, After 400 Years, will begin the journey to looking forward using biblical scripture, expertise from known and unknown Negroid Israelite scholars and teachers, as well as excerpts and truth findings from viewers like you and me, which study the scriptures and desire to know what Father Yah, in the name of his son Yahushua HaMashiach, has in store for the redeemed Israelite remnant, the chosen Gentiles, and the world that does not know him.
All I wanted was to fix my life. Now I have the power to fix history. Raiden warns me, I can't fix everything. Change too much and I could lose Vera, lose Jackie. But this power is bigger than us. If I think only about helping myself, what kind of officer am I? What kind of man? I've been lucky. My family and I have lived the American dream. But most people who look like me haven't had that chance. I owe it to them to put things right. And I'm not waiting centuries for people to get woke when I've got the power to speed things up. I don't get it right the first time, or the second, or even the third. But eventually, I knock it out of the damn park. My family's back. The world's a better place for everyone. Turns out, you can have everything. Anyone who says you can't needs to dream bigger.